An atom bomb is one of the most powerful weapons ever created by humans. But what exactly is an atom bomb, and how does it work? Let's start with the basics. Everything around us is made up of tiny particles called atoms. Atoms are so small that you can't see them with your eyes, but they are the building blocks of everything from the air we breathe to the food we eat. Each atom has a nucleus at its center, which is made up of even smaller particles called protons and neutrons. Surrounding the nucleus are electrons that zip around it, kind of like how planets orbit around the sun. Inside the nucleus of an atom, there is a lot of energy holding the protons and neutrons together. This energy is extremely powerful, but it usually stays trapped inside the nucleus. However, scientists discovered a way to release this energy in a process called nuclear fission. When an atom's nucleus is split apart, it releases a huge amount of energy, and this is what makes an atom bomb so powerful. In an atom bomb, special kinds of atoms, such as uranium or plutonium, are used. These atoms have very large, unstable nuclei. When a small particle called a neutron crashes into one of these atoms, it causes the nucleus to split apart. This releases a burst of energy and more neutrons, which then hit other atoms, causing them to split as well. This creates a chain reaction, where more and more atoms are split, releasing more and more energy. In just a fraction of a second, this process creates a gigantic explosion. The explosion from an atom bomb is so strong that it can destroy entire cities. It produces a bright flash of light, intense heat, and a powerful shock wave that can flatten buildings and knock people off their feet. In addition, it releases radiation, which is an invisible force that can harm living things, making it dangerous for people, animals, and plants. The first atom bombs were developed during World War II by a group of scientists in the United States as part of a secret project called the Manhattan Project. These bombs were so powerful that they were only used twice in history, during the final days of the war, on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. The destruction caused by these bombs was so terrible that it led to the end of the war but also showed the world just how dangerous nuclear weapons could be. Now that we know what an atom bomb is and how it works, we can begin to understand why it is such a powerful and dangerous invention. Now that we know an atom bomb releases a massive amount of energy, let's explore how that happens and why it's so powerful. To understand the science behind an atom bomb, we need to look inside the atom itself. At the heart of every atom is a tiny center called the nucleus, which is made up of protons and neutrons. The energy that holds these particles together is incredibly strong, much stronger than most forces we see in everyday life. But if this nucleus is broken apart, or split, it releases a huge amount of energy. This splitting of an atom's nucleus is called nuclear fission. In an atom bomb, the key ingredient is uranium-235 or plutonium-239. These are special kinds of atoms that have large, unstable nuclei. Here's how it works. 1. Starting the reaction. In the bomb, a device called an initiator shoots neutrons, tiny particles, into the nucleus of a uranium or plutonium atom. When one of these neutrons hits the nucleus, it causes the nucleus to split into smaller parts. 2. The chain reaction. When the nucleus splits, it releases not only energy but also more neutrons. These new neutrons then fly off and hit other nearby uranium or plutonium atoms, causing them to split as well. Each time an atom splits, it releases more energy and more neutrons. This keeps happening in a chain reaction, where each split causes more and more atoms to break apart. 3. Massive energy release. As the chain reaction continues, millions and millions of atoms split in just a tiny fraction of a second. The energy released from all these splitting atoms creates a huge explosion. The power of this explosion is so great that it can destroy entire cities. In fact, the energy from a single atom bomb can be many thousands of times more powerful than even the largest conventional bomb. The energy from the atom bomb explosion comes in several forms. Heat. The explosion creates an incredibly hot fireball, hotter than the surface of the sun. This heat can cause buildings and objects to burst into flames instantly. Light. A blinding flash of light is the first thing that people see when an atom bomb explodes. This light can be so bright that it can temporarily blind anyone who looks directly at it. Shockwave. The explosion creates a powerful shockwave that travels out from the center of the blast. This shockwave is like an intense gust of wind that can knock down buildings, cars, and trees. People standing miles away can feel the force of the explosion. Radiation. Along with the explosion, an atom bomb also releases dangerous radiation. This radiation is invisible, but it can make people very sick and cause long-term damage to their bodies. Radiation can also affect the environment, making the area around the explosion unsafe for living things for many years. The power of an atom bomb comes from the speed and strength of this chain reaction. In just a blink of an eye, the energy inside millions of atoms is released, and the result is an explosion so powerful that it can wipe out everything in its path. This incredible power is why atom bombs are so dangerous. It's also why many countries work hard to control these weapons and make sure they're never used again. The story of the atom bomb begins during a difficult time in world history, World War II. Countries around the world were fighting, and some of the world's best scientists were searching for new ways to win the war. It was during this time that the idea of the atom bomb was born. In the late 1930s, scientists discovered nuclear fission, which is the process of splitting atoms to release energy. They realized that if they could figure out how to control this process, they could create a bomb with unimaginable power. The race to build such a bomb began when scientists warned the United States that Nazi Germany might be working on its own nuclear weapon. In response, the United States started a secret project to develop an atom bomb, known as the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was a top-secret effort that started in 1942. It brought together the smartest scientists and engineers from around the world, including famous physicists like Albert Einstein and J. Robert Oppenheimer. These scientists worked in secret laboratories across the US, with the most important work happening in a place called Los Alamos, in New Mexico. The scientists knew they needed to find the right kind of atom to use in the bomb, so they focused on two elements, uranium and plutonium. These elements were special because their atoms could easily undergo nuclear fission. After years of hard work and countless experiments, the scientists finally created two types of bombs, one using uranium and the other using plutonium. Before the bombs could be used in war, the scientists needed to make sure they would work. So, they set up the world's first test of an atom bomb, called the Trinity test. On July 16, 1945, in the New Mexico desert, the first atom bomb was detonated. When the bomb exploded, it created a massive fireball, a mushroom-shaped cloud, and a shockwave that could be felt miles away. The test was a success, but everyone who saw it realized just how dangerous these bombs were. At the time, the world was still in the middle of World War II. The United States was fighting against Japan, and after years of fierce battles, the US decided to use the newly developed atom bombs to try to force Japan to surrender. Two bombs were ready to be used, and they were given special code names, Little Boy and Fat Man. On August 6, 1945, the first bomb, Little Boy, was dropped on the city of Hiroshima. The explosion was catastrophic. The bomb destroyed most of the city, and thousands of people lost their lives in an instant. Buildings were flattened, and fires broke out everywhere. People who were far away from the explosion felt the shockwave, and the heat from the bomb burned everything in its path. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, the second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. This bomb was just as destructive as the first, and once again, thousands of people were killed or injured. The damage to Nagasaki was immense, and the entire city was left in ruins. The devastation caused by the two atom bombs was so overwhelming that Japan surrendered soon after, on August 15, 1945. This marked the end of World War II. The use of the atom bomb played a big role in ending the war, but it also showed the world just how dangerous these weapons could be. The destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki left lasting scars, and the people who survived the bombings, known as hibakusha, had to deal with the effects of radiation for the rest of their lives. After the war, the world was shocked by the power of the atom bomb. Many countries, including the United States and the Soviet Union, realized that nuclear weapons could change the course of history. This led to the start of the Cold War, a time when countries competed to build more and more powerful nuclear weapons but tried not to actually use them in war. Countries began testing bigger bombs, and the fear of nuclear war spread around the world. The history of the atom bomb is a story of scientific discovery, war, and the search for peace. It shows us how powerful science can be and reminds us of the importance of using that power responsibly. The explosion of an atom bomb is one of the most powerful forces on Earth, and the effects of such a blast can be devastating. When an atom bomb explodes, it creates an enormous burst of energy in the form of heat, light, and a shockwave. These effects happen in just a few seconds but can cause incredible destruction. Heat. The explosion creates a fireball that can reach temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. The intense heat instantly vaporizes anything near the center of the blast. Buildings, trees, cars, and even people are burned or melted by the heat. People several miles away can still be affected by the extreme temperatures, causing severe burns even if they aren't close to the explosion. Light. The bright flash of light from the explosion is so intense that it can blind people who look directly at it. This flash of light can be seen from miles away, and its brightness can temporarily or permanently damage a person's eyesight. Shockwave. Along with the heat and light, the explosion creates a powerful shockwave that travels through the air. This shockwave acts like a massive gust of wind, moving at hundreds of miles per hour. It flattens buildings, uproots trees, and tosses vehicles through the air. The shockwave can knock people off their feet or crush them under collapsing structures. Even far away from the blast, the shockwave can shatter windows and knock down walls. One of the most dangerous effects of an atom bomb is the release of radiation. Radiation is energy that travels in invisible waves or particles and can harm living things. There are two main types of radiation that come from an atom bomb: immediate radiation and fallout. Immediate radiation. This radiation is released in the first few moments after the explosion. It spreads out quickly from the center of the blast and can cause serious health problems for anyone exposed to it. People close to the explosion may get radiation sickness, which can make them very sick, with symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and hair loss. Fallout. After the explosion, tiny particles of radioactive dust, called fallout, are carried into the air by the wind. These particles can travel long distances and settle on the ground, in water, and on plants. Fallout is dangerous because it remains radioactive for a long time, making the environment unsafe for humans, animals, and plants. People exposed to fallout may develop serious health problems, like cancer, many years after the explosion. The immediate destruction caused by an atom bomb is terrible, but the long-term effects can be just as harmful. People who survive the blast may suffer from radiation-related illnesses for the rest of their lives. The land and water around the explosion can be contaminated with radiation, making it unsafe to live there for many years. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the two cities where atom bombs were dropped during World War II, people struggled to rebuild their lives after the war. Many survivors, known as hibakusha, dealt with health problems from radiation exposure. The environment was also affected, with plants and animals suffering from the radiation for years. These long-lasting effects show how destructive atom bombs can be, not just in the moment but for generations to come. The terrible power of atom bombs has taught the world an important lesson: these weapons are too dangerous to use. After World War II ended, the United States and the Soviet Union, which is now Russia, became the two most powerful countries in the world. Both countries had developed nuclear weapons, and they were afraid that if one of them used an atom bomb, it could lead to a war where both sides would destroy each other. This period of tension, called the Cold War, lasted for many years, and during this time, both countries built thousands of nuclear bombs. This time was known as the nuclear arms race because countries were competing to build more and more bombs. The fear of nuclear war spread around the world, and people worried about what would happen if these bombs were ever used again. Luckily, no one wanted to start a nuclear war, so even though many bombs were built, they were never used. As the years went by, leaders from different countries began to realize that the world would be safer if no one had nuclear weapons. This led to agreements called nuclear treaties, where countries promised to limit or reduce the number of nuclear weapons they had. One of the most important treaties is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, signed in 1968. This treaty is an agreement between countries to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. Countries that already had nuclear weapons promised to reduce their stockpiles, and other countries agreed not to build any new bombs. The NPT is still in effect today, and many countries work together to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. The United Nations, UN, is an organization that was created after World War II to help countries solve their problems peacefully. One of the main goals of the UN is to prevent wars and promote peace. The UN plays an important role in encouraging countries to work together to stop the use of nuclear weapons. It holds meetings where world leaders discuss ways to make the world a safer place and try to prevent conflicts from escalating into war. Around the world, many people believe that nuclear weapons should be completely eliminated. These people are part of the disarmament movement, which calls for countries to get rid of all their nuclear weapons. There have been many peaceful protests, campaigns, and organizations working toward a world without nuclear weapons. One famous effort was led by a woman named Bertha von Suttner, who campaigned for peace in the early 1900s. Although her work began long before the first atom bomb was built, she inspired future generations to fight for peace. In 1905, she became the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts to promote peace and prevent war. Today, most countries agree that nuclear weapons should never be used again. The destruction they cause is too great, and the risks are too high. While some countries still have nuclear weapons, the goal is to continue reducing the number of bombs in the world and to prevent any future wars from involving these terrible weapons. The world has learned a lot from the history of the atom bomb. The hope for the future is that nations will continue to work together for peace, and that the power of science will be used for good rather than for harm. By understanding the history and the dangers of nuclear weapons, we can all do our part to make sure that the world remains safe for future generations.